Hello, my name is Laurel, and in this video I'm going to talk you through a practical guide to recruiting and motivating students for invention and research experiences. Now, maybe you are fully convinced, you're at the point where you're saying, yes, I absolutely want to do this, but I don't have any students that want to, and I've definitely been through that myself. And I'm here today to share with you some things that have worked for me to recruit students and also to keep them motivated as they engage in this inherently challenging but ultimately rewarding experience of doing invention and research projects. Okay, let's get started. First step is recruiting students. So how do you find the students that are going to make up your invention and research program? For some of you, you might be doing this in class, and if that's the case, then you've recruited them already. They are in your class and they're going to be doing it. However, for some of us, we instead need to start with a invention or research club, or maybe we're wanting to start an elective course that students can take, but we need to recruit students in order to encourage them to sign up for our course. So first, you need to narrow down your target audience. Who is it that you are trying to reach out to? And that could mean which grade levels is largely what that ends up meaning. Which grade levels are you going to be reaching out to firstly? And also, which teachers do you know that might have a good feel for which students might be interested in this type of experience? I do want to encourage you to expand your reach beyond just the standard students that you might think of, those students that are already excelling in their traditional courses, students that you already know are super interested in science. Maybe there are students out there, in fact, not just maybe, I guarantee there are students out there that don't necessarily perform super well in a traditional school environment or classroom environment, but thrive in experiences where they are able to be the ones that are in the driver's seat, that are learning about things that they are passionate about, where they get the voice and choice in what it is that they're learning about. Once you've identified students that you want to reach out to, make a plan for contacting them, or make a plan for contacting teachers that then can also nominate students. A lot of times we don't necessarily teach all of the students in the school, right? Sometimes that might be the case, but not always. And so it can be useful to reach out to other teachers to nominate students. And it's such an honor and empowering thing for a student to receive a nomination. It makes them more likely to show up to whatever informational meeting you're going to have about it if they feel like they have the confidence of someone else telling them that they are capable of doing this. So I highly recommend also handing out nomination slips. I've found that students absolutely love getting that kind of recognition and also that encouragement to do an experience like this. Also make a plan for contacting families. So especially once students have said that they are interested, then comes the point of contacting their families to make sure that they get buy-in, which sometimes means also making sure that you have your materials translated into the language that their families speak. So getting whatever support you need for that if you do not speak their language yourself, and making sure that you are reaching out to parents either by phone or with informational letters sent home so that they are in the loop with what is happening. I also highly recommend setting up teacher parent, teacher family information nights where you get to be face-to-face with them, you get to build that relationship with them, especially if these are parents of students that you haven't had in your other classes. And that connection is really important, especially as you're wanting to continue to motivate your students throughout the entire process. You want to make sure that the families are included in that process as well. And it also makes it all the more meaningful once you reach the end of their project and you're able to present to the families and they already have an idea of what's been going on and they can see how that investment has paid out in the end with their students presenting this amazing invention or research. Okay, so you've identified students, you've sent out nominations, you've held your student info meeting, your parent family info meeting. Now, they have signed up for your class or your club. How do you make sure that they stay motivated throughout the process? I have a few tips here. Also, tons of resources linked below. Absolutely. Click them, use them, edit them for your own purposes. And the first one I'm going to talk about is student voice and choice. So make sure that students are really the ones that are deciding what their project looks like. So consider how you can discover student interest, and also how students can discover what they're interested in themselves. Maybe that is different types of speakers that they could listen to, or maybe that's encouraging them to do some preliminary research online, looking up different things. There's also the Google Science Fair made this really great idea generation diamond, where it has different topics that they could maybe look into more, and they organize it based on their own interests, just to give them a starting point. Then also, I encourage you to brainstorm topics yourself that are relevant to your students' lives, and that way you can present that to students that maybe are a little bit stuck, and you can get your students excited about things that they get to see in their everyday lives, problems that they see in their everyday lives. I also think it is important to make sure from the beginning that you've designed some sort of process for centering student voice. One way that I've done that in the past is I've had students elect representatives for their classes. And so I taught 6 classes, and so I had 6 different representatives at one point, one from each class, that then would meet with me once a week at lunch. I would just go to the lunchroom and I would meet with them and we would chat. Sometimes I would bring some snacks, and they would give me feedback on how they think the class is going, things that they are really enjoying, that their classmates are really enjoying, things that they wish were different. And then I would report those things out to my classes the following week, just a really brief slide at the beginning, just saying, hey, I heard these things from your reps, and so we're going to, these are the changes, or these are the things that we're going to keep doing. And you don't have to do it once a week. It could be once a month. It could be at the end of a unit, however that looks like for you. But that was something that I found particularly useful, because it also gave me a pulse check on how students were feeling, and then I was better able to make sure that I was teaching them in a way that felt relevant and engaging for them. And I also, at the end of each unit, would have a whole group circle with my classes, and then every student, we would pass a talking piece, and every student would have the opportunity, they weren't forced to, but would have the opportunity to share the things that they feel like are going well and the things that they would like to change. And not everyone has the time or is able to make the time to do those kinds of circles, but I do think that at least having some representatives, having some sort of check-in with students to make sure that they feel like they are really the drivers of the classroom. You're there to guide them, for sure, you're there to guide them. But that they really are able to take ownership over their work is really important. And so your system might look different, but think through some sort of system. It could even be an anonymous suggestions box if you want, but some sort of system where your students are able to voice how they think things are going. They're able to make choices about what their projects look like, and you're also able to demonstrate that you've heard them and you're actually implementing these things in a way that they're able to shape their classroom and really take ownership over what they're doing. I have found that to be a huge motivating factor for them, because the more that they are able to take ownership, the more that they feel responsible for what's happening, and the more that they'll feel motivated to continue going on and going forward with it. My next tip is to include team building and games. And I know it might feel like, but how can I have time to do these things? Make the time, carve out time, and not just at the beginning, carve out time in the middle and at the end, to be able to allow your students to have fun. Because we want, I know for me personally, and I know for many teachers I've talked to, we want our students to have fun with science, to see science as something that brings joy to their lives. And a way to do that is to make sure that you are providing them with opportunities for joy. Obviously, this is really hard work. Doing a research or invention project involves a lot of time and effort on their part. So as much as you can include those moments of rest and joy where they just get to have fun, the more motivated they'll be, the more energized they'll be to keep going even through those moments that are hard. And team building is really important for that community building aspect, which I'll also talk about in the next step. But the more that students are able to build community, the more that they'll feel a part of a team and a part of something greater than themselves, and also the more that they'll be able to build support networks within their group to be able to uplift each other so that they don't feel like they're going through this all on their own. They don't feel isolated. And I've actually talked with teachers about how oftentimes students are drawn to sports, and they might feel like sports competes with opportunities like this, particularly if this is being done as an after-school club. And I think one of the biggest benefits that students get from sports is this sense of community and team. And I'm not saying that they should automatically give up their sports. Obviously, they should try to do both as much as they can. I did both. I played sports and did science fair in school as a student myself, and I had students who did also. There's ways to do projects that are an intersection of the two. But I think that we can't overestimate the power of community in making students feel like this is something they want to keep coming back to. As I said, it is a challenging time. There's a lot of hard work that goes in, just like there's a lot of hard work and challenge in sports. But part of what makes students feel like they want to keep coming back is because it's a place where they feel a sense of belonging and a sense of team and a sense of community. So do those team builders. Make the time for team builders. You can make the team builders related to doing research and invention, absolutely, if you want to, or they can just be random fun team builders. But definitely build in that time for your students to build a sense of community. So that then they really feel like part of a team rather than just isolated individuals doing projects. Now, this is connected to the idea of community, but peer mentorship is something that I have found incredibly helpful and effective for student motivation and being able to complete their projects. Identify areas where you can find spots for student leadership opportunities. Where can students take the lead in this? And how can you provide them with a structure that sets them up for success in being mentors for their peers and being leaders for their peers? And I have put my own resources below that helped both in enabling student mentors to choose their mentees based on their own individual strengths and interests, and also how some trackers, some check-in guidelines for them so that they could have a framework for supporting those students. And those are below. And what that did was, one, it gave a great opportunity for students to really take the lead and feel an additional sense of ownership and responsibility. It also took some of the load off of me, because then these student mentors were able to check in weekly with their mentees and then get back to me rather than me having to individually check in with everybody, which can be really helpful, especially once you grow your program. And also, I have found, maybe this isn't true for you, but for me, sometimes if I'm the one giving the reminder over and over again, you gotta get this thing done, you gotta get this thing done, it can sometimes be a lot more influential for them to hear it from a peer rather than from their teacher. And so I have found that peer mentorships can be really helpful that way too. And that's not to say that we're incapable of giving that motivation. Obviously, we can and we should. But their peers are also, they're going through it in a much more similar way to what they're going through right now. You know, their peers are able to make those connections in ways that maybe we're just not able to. And so they can be really effective leaders and mentors for students. And we cannot underestimate the power that they have to be leaders for their fellow students. As I mentioned, those mentors, those peer mentors, can be checking in with them weekly and letting you know their progress. But regardless of whether you have peer mentors or not, you need some sort of method for tracking student progress. Something that your students can use to keep track of their own progress that you can also access so that you can keep track of their progress too. Design some sort of system for that. It could be an online system, or it could be a pen and paper system. And I have some of my own progress trackers linked below that you are more than welcome to use and adapt the dates and so forth to your own program, but have some sort of tracker. And in those thinking about tracking, don't just wait to celebrate at the very end once everything's done. It can be incredibly motivating to have little celebrations along the way, even if it was just a tiny step, and those little celebrations might look different for each student, depending on each individual student's needs and what kind of motivation they need and where they need that motivation. But come up ahead of time with some sort of way to celebrate those little wins too along the way, so that students are really feeling celebrated and motivated throughout the whole process and not just at the end. And make sure that, once again, those trackers are available for you and also your students so that they can see their benchmarks along the way and they have an idea of how close they are to the end, and they know what it is that's coming up next. So definitely track progress, create trackers for that progress, and create a plan for celebrating little wins along the way. And finally, this tip or method of motivation is definitely the biggest lift of all the ones that I have presented to you so far, but it really can make such a big difference, and that is planning a field trip. Now, for me, what that looked like for my students was a trip to the Big Thicket National Preserve, where they had already finished their other individual projects, and now they were doing a group project on biodiversity. And we all went out to the Big Thicket, which was a few hours away from our school. And we actually stayed the night in a research station there and spent the weekend there. And then they were able to collect their data, spend time out in the woods, which, being from Houston in an urban environment, was something that some of them had never done before. We were able to spend time in the woods and hiking and exploring outside. And then we came back and they were able to analyze their data and put it together into a symposium to present to families. Now, the field trip doesn't necessarily have to involve a research project of some kind. I just think getting out there and doing something different in and of itself is incredibly motivating for students. It provides an additional opportunity for team building. It is an experience that they might not otherwise get to have, which can be really motivating, particularly if they know that it's something they're going to get to do. So that can encourage recruitment. It can also encourage them to continue working through challenges along the way, knowing that they've got this big thing to look forward to. And I know for my students that it was something that changed the way that they even looked at the world. And it's such a great opportunity to break the normal mold of what their day normally looks like and get out there. And so this field trip could be something big like what I just described. And in those cases, you might need to apply for grants. I applied for the Kids to Park Day grant. Highly recommend it. You can look it up. They're still doing it as far as I'm aware. Or it could look like just something as simple as getting outside and spending some time outside in the grass instead of inside in your classroom. And if that's what you have the capacity for, is just going outside of your school and having a little picnic, then that's what you have capacity for. If you can do something that's bigger, then I highly recommend doing that. Either way, plan something that's out of the norm, that gets your students doing something different together, gets them outside of the classroom, so that they have that shared experience together and something to look forward to. As I said, you might need to identify a source of funding if you're going to do something bigger, and some sort of mode of transportation will need to be figured out if you're going off campus, and you'll also need to outline a schedule of events for the field trip. I've included for you the template that my school used when I was designing the Big Thicket trip, and it even has the information I had in there. You can obviously erase that and fill it in with your own, but come up with some sort of plan for some sort of out of the ordinary activity that you can do with your students that can be really motivating and also reinforce that sense of community and wonder for the world around them. And you will see that being a really great motivator for them. And that's what I've got for ideas for student recruitment and motivation. You might have your own ideas that are completely different from these, and that is absolutely great. Do those. You know your students best. You know what best motivates them. And I highly recommend taking a look at the student motivation template, add in your own ideas for these different things, and get started thinking through how you can recruit your students and keep them motivated through this process, and make it something fun for you too. You know, you're going to have to stay motivated too. So definitely start with what you have capacity for, and then you can build up to bigger things later. But I hope that this has provided you with at least one or two ideas that you feel like you can go ahead and try for your own students, and I look forward to hearing from you and what you've been able to accomplish with your students and helping them stay motivated. I hope you have a really great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.